Yep, it's already March 2024, and that means we're going to be talking about all kinds of shit from 30 years ago, 1994, March to be exact, and it's a packed month. So let's get to it. First off, the most important thing to talk about in any year in the month of March is that it is my birthday month. I was born on March 2nd, 1978. So in 1994, I was turning 16 years old. And at this point, music was my life. An obsession, if you will. An obsession that has not gone away in 30 years. First off, if you're hearing like humming and weird noises, they're doing some sort of gas line shit outside of my house. I don't know why they got to do it right now, but whatever. The show must go on. You probably can't even hear it. But in case you can, it's their fault. First up, let's talk about the number one albums in the country for March 1994. For the first 2 weeks of March of 1994, the number one album in the country was Mariah Carey, Music Box. Mariah Carey's third album. I don't necessarily know what songs were on this one, but I'm sure there were videos, and I'm sure I saw them, and I'm sure I enjoyed them, but that's about as far as it goes. For the third week of March, the number one album in the country was the self-titled debut album from Toni Braxton. Same thing. I'm sure I heard the songs and saw the videos back in the day, but that shit did not carry over with me 30 years down the line. But for the fourth week of March 1994, an album that is absolutely still with me to this day and has aged beautifully, if I may say so, the album Super Unknown from Soundgarden was the number one album in the country. Congratulations, Soundgarden, but we're going to stop right there because we're going to be talking about that album a little bit later. Now it's on to what was number one in the box office. Is that what in the in the movie theater box? What? For the first week of March, the number one movie in the country, meaning the US of A, was Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. We talked about that last month. Let's move on. For the second week of March 1994, the number one movie in the country was Guarding Tess with Nicolas Cage, and this is like one of those things. It could be a Mandela effect where I'm just like, this movie, this didn't really exist, right? But most likely what happened is I took one look at the poster and went, who the fuck wants to watch this, even with Nick Cage in it? Apparently, all of America. For the third week of March 1994, the number one movie in the country, a movie that I did see in the movie theater, Naked Gun, 33 1/3, The Final Insult. The third movie in the Naked Gun trilogy, and even in 94, not a lot of people got the 33 1/3 reference, and I'm sure a lot of them don't get it today either. It's records. They revolve at that rate, 33 1/3 revolutions per minute, right? Does the movie have anything to do with records? Absolutely not, but that doesn't matter because this was the movie that introduced most of us to Anna Nicole Smith. Now, there may have been some of you out there that already knew her from Playboy, but who the fuck ever read Playboy? I'm guessing a lot of people because that shit stayed relevant up until Home Dude died. What was his name? Ralph? No, fucking Ralph. I just gave him the name Ralph. What was his name? Sorry, dude. Didn't read your magazine. Don't remember your name. And honestly, I don't remember much else about Naked Gun 33 1/3. Anna Nicole Smith is in it. Rest in peace, Anna Nicole Smith. For the fourth week of March 1994, a movie that I did not see, I have never seen, but I have a feeling that there's a lot of you out there that have seen this, D2, The Mighty Ducks, which is, it's a weird title because it's like D2, like Terminator 2, only Ducks 2, but then it's a colon, and then The Mighty Ducks, which is the name of the first movie, which is utterly confusing. Either way, the Ducks are back, and Emilio Estevez is back. I like that dude. But other than that, I got nothing for you. All right, it's on to the album releases of March of 1994. Starting the month off very strong, in my opinion. The very first day of the month saw the release of what a lot of us thought was the debut album from Beck, Mellow Gold, but it's actually his third album. His second release of 1994 at that point. I guess it's his first like major label album, but still, this was the album that really put him on the map and introduced a lot of us to Beck. And man, I loved this album so much. It's been a little while since I listened to the whole thing, but it was really kind of influential in me when it came to like doing my own music, because there's so many different kinds of recordings on here. Some that were clearly kind of done on an 8-track, and some that with a little more production value. But it really sort of opened my mind to me. I can just experiment with what I have and make music. And so Beck has a lot to do with the shit that I start to make that nobody has heard, nor will you. But Mellow Gold is a great album, and one of the best of 1994 to me, just because it's so quintessentially 1994. Moving on to the 8th of March 1994, it saw the release of this album, one of my favorite albums of all time, Magnified by Failure, the second Failure album, and it was the first one I ever heard by them, and I don't know what to say about Failure. If you don't know them, go look them up. But they're one of my favorite bands of all time. And this was another one of those albums that really kind of opened my mind to different things when it came to music and the composition of music and guitar melodies. And it's a very important album for me. And it came out on the 8th of March. But don't get ready to move on just yet, because the 8th of March is a big month. This motherfucker came out on the 8th of March, 1994. Nail Bomb, Point Blank, the only, did I say Point Blake? Yeah, good old Blake. He's blank, he's pointed. You know what it is my brain gets like far ahead of my mouth and I just start talking. I get excited, especially when I'm talking about an album like Point Blank from Nail Bomb. So if you didn't know, this was a little side project from Max Cavalera of Sepultura, but also Alex Newport of Fudge Tunnel. And it is an album that has aged remarkably well, in my opinion, just because of the combination of like the thrashiness, the grooviness, the industrialness, and all that stuff. It's aggressive, it's fun as fuck. Man, I love this album, Nail Bomb, Point Blank. Also released on March 8th, 1994, The Downward Spiral, the second album from Nine Inch Nails. And do I really need to say anything about this album that other people haven't already said? It's a great album. It's a masterpiece of alternative industrial rock music, and arguably his best. So that's it. It's a great fucking album. Came out on March 8th. And another album that a ton of people have talked about and deserves all the praise that it gets, we talked about it a little bit earlier. March 8th brought us Super Unknown. Man, this reissued cover, I'm not really a big fan. I mean, I don't know what it is. Like, this is fine. That is better. Don't change album covers. I don't like that. Super Unknown was the biggest album for Soundgarden, brought them a shitload of new fans. They completely blew up, and it was absolutely deserved because it's just chock full of amazing songs, some of the best songwriting they ever did, and some really heavy shit. And just as an album, it's a little long, but overall, I don't know what I would cut out. It is just a fucking killer 90s rock album. What else can I say? Moving on to the 15th of March, 1994, Motley Crue, the self-titled Motley Crue album, which is the only Motley Crue album to feature vocalist John Corabi, who was in the band for several years when Vince Neil was fired and left. And it's a pretty damn good album. I think one of my earliest old head podcasts from 5 years ago, I talked about this album and its strengths and its weaknesses, which it does have weaknesses, but overall, I'd say it's aged pretty well, and it's certainly better than anything Motley Crue did after this album. And John Corabi's great, and this is a cool rock album. And at the time, I remember really liking Hooligan's Holiday, but I didn't go and get this album. It was years later where I finally listened to it, and I was like, oh yeah, it's pretty fucking good. So, if you haven't given it a shot, a self-titled Motley Crue album. On to March 22nd, 1994. Pantera, Far Beyond Driven. Once again, now this isn't like a changed cover. This is actually a 1994 pressing of this album, and they came with this cover, which is not really. I mean, I like that I have this, but I prefer this cover right here, which is the one a lot of us knew. I bought it on cassette when it came out, and this is what it had on the cover. Anyway, Far Beyond Driven, I go back and forth on what my favorite Pantera album is. This one is the third or seventh, depending on who you're talking to. But this was a very highly anticipated album for me, because they released the video for I'm Broken, I don't know, maybe a month or two prior to the album coming out. And it was one of those things where I had to get the album so badly. I was really into Vulgar Display. And I was like, I just want to get this album so bad that I remember my friends and I walking over to the Best Buy, and I bought it on cassette, even though I had a CD player, but I did not have enough money for a CD. So I got the cassette. What do you prefer, cassettes or CDs? Did you say CDs? CD nuts! Did you say cassette? Cassette these nuts in your mouth! I am in rare form today. What the fuck? Moving on to the 28th of March, 1994. I say that because this is a lesser known release and it's hard to find an exact date. And it said the 28th on something that I found, and so I'm just running with that. This is an album a lot of people don't know, but it's a very important one. This is the debut album from the Irish band Compulsion. Can you see that? Yeah, there you go. Compulsion. It's called Comforter. And it is, alternative rock, a little punky, I guess. I don't know. But this is an album that I heard because of a friend in 1994-ish. And I just loved it, and it has been one of those albums I've just carried with me for 30 years. And it is a lesser known one, so you know how I am. Things that are underappreciated or lesser known that I love, they're the ones that I hold very dear. And go check it out. It's cool alternative guitar rock, Compulsion. All right, now the 29th of March. See what I'm saying? There's a whole lot to talk about in this month. And on the 29th of March, the soundtrack for the movie The Crow came out. Now, this was a couple months before the actual movie came out, but this soundtrack was a big deal, if you remember. And really, the selling point was all the different artists that were on it. I mean, you had a new song from Stone Temple Pilots, you had an unreleased song from Rage Against the Machine, you had Rollins Band, you had Nine Inch Nails, The Cure. I mean, there's some shit that is on this soundtrack as well. But at the time, I just remember getting the soundtrack and really being into, pretty much everything on it. And the build up to the movie was crazy because the soundtrack was very strong. We'll talk about what I actually thought about the movie probably in a couple months. I don't know. That movie wasn't number one at the box office. I'll tell you now. Didn't really like it. It was disappointing. I thought the acting was really bad. I don't know why it's built up so much of a cult following over the years. But I don't know. Maybe I need to go watch it again and I'm missing something. But I've seen it a few times since, and it was always just okay. But the soundtrack, last but not least, also released on the 29th of March, 1994. The third album from Infectious Grooves, Groove Family Psycho. I'm going to be honest with you, I haven't heard this one in a long time. I remember not being very into it, and that's all I really have. But it came out. I like Mike Muir. I like Infectious Grooves. I'll revisit it one day and then get back to you on that. But it came out in March. That's kind of a ending to this, but it's not over yet. Who wants to go back another 10 years? March 1984. I was 6 years old. Some of this music was music I listened to at the time. Some of it, like this album, I got around to later on. And I couldn't find a date for when this album came out. It was just sometime in March. My War from Black Flag. This was actually the first of 3 albums they would release in 1984. And this is the second one with Henry Rollins on vocals. If you've watched any of my shit or watched the Cranked and Ranked we did on Black Flag, you'll know how I feel about Henry Rollins era Black Flag. It is, in my opinion, the absolute best. The other stuff is good, but, and especially this album, this is creme de la flag right here. Released on March 13th, 1984, an album that I absolutely listened to a shitload along with the rest of the country. Heartbeat City from the Cars. Let's do the fold out. There you go. Heartbeat City. This was the Mutt Lange produced thing that costs so much fucking money and sound. To me, it still sounds amazing today. And it had all kinds of hits on it. Like Magic, Drive, Hello Again. You Might Think. There may have been another one. I don't know. I just remember that it was on the radio, but also my older brother had this album and I would steal it from him and listen to it all the time. And I'm still a big Cars fan. This is really their last. They did an album after this. We don't really talk about that one. It's fine, but luckily it's not 1984. But this one came out in 84, and it's a great 80s pop album. Yeah, it's great. Okay, closing out this episode and March 1984. For people who are in the world of metal, this was a big deal. Well, I don't know. At the time, I don't know if it was immediately a big deal, but now it is. And it came out on my birthday, March 2nd, 1984. None More Black, Spinal Tap, the soundtrack to the movie Spinal Tap, This Is Spinal Tap, that also came out on March 2nd, 1984. And it's like one of those movies. I first saw Spinal Tap probably in the late 80s. And it's been one of my favorite movies ever since. And this soundtrack is an absolute blast. Look, you can open it up there. And look, there's some of the fake album covers, including Shark Sandwich. But yeah, do I really need to talk about Spinal Tap? Apparently, they were going to be making a sequel to Spinal Tap where they're like older dudes now. And I'm still looking very much forward to that, but I haven't heard anything about it. There was that, actors and writers strike, and then I never heard another thing, but hopefully they're working on it because I would love. It's going to be, I think the premise is so fucking funny. This movie's hilarious. Bring the same guys back, and now they're dealing with being aging rock stars. Comedy gold. The well is probably so deep for all of the shit that they're able to pull out for laughs. I'm telling you, man. Mark my words. But this movie, if you haven't seen it, go watch This Is Spinal Tap. It's a fucking classic. All right, that wraps up this episode of 30 years ago and 40 years ago this month. And I hope you guys had a great time. As you can tell, I'm having a great time. Some days my energy is just, I think it's because I'm filming this and it's almost my birthday weekend and I took a long weekend and I'm just going to be drinking some beers and listening to some music and having a good old time. And so I think I'm already in vacation mode. By the time this comes out, that weekend will be ending. But I'm assuming I had a great time. But I hope you had a great time watching 30 years ago this month. And I will see you all again next month.